Virginia, 1858. A 24-year-old enslaved brother named James faces the toughest choice of his life. He breaks into his master's safe, steals $950, and sells his own 16-year-old sister Eliza to a stranger. Not to hurt her, but to save her. Because the other option? A one-way ticket to a New Orleans brothel, then shipped to Cuba to work until she dies. This isn't betrayal. It's love that breaks every rule. It's courage that changes history. Hit like if you believe family is worth fighting for. Subscribe and turn on the bell. Let's get into it. My name is James, and I was 24 years old when I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love requires the greatest betrayal, and that saving someone's life might cost you everything you hold dear, including their love for you. It was the spring of 1858 in Virginia, where the dogwood trees bloomed white against the red clay soil, and the air carried the scent of magnolia blossoms that masked the stench of human misery. I worked as a field hand on the Harrington plantation, one of the largest cotton operations in the county, where 300 souls labored under conditions that would have shamed the devil himself. Master Nathaniel Harrington was a man of perhaps 50 years with graying hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to calculate the monetary value of everything they looked upon, including the human beings he owned. He prided himself on running an efficient operation, which meant extracting maximum profit from his property, while spending as little as possible on their care and feeding. But it was his son, Benjamin Harrington, who truly embodied the evil that slavery could produce in the hearts of white men. At 26, Benjamin was handsome in the way that made him popular with Richmond society, but beneath his charming exterior lay a cruelty that seemed to spring from some poisoned well deep in his soul. He took particular pleasure in tormenting the female slaves, using his position of absolute power to satisfy twisted desires that grew more depraved with each passing year. My sister Eliza was 16 years old, beautiful in the way that made her both blessed and cursed in the world of slavery. She had inherited our mother's delicate features and graceful bearing, along with an intelligence that shone in her dark eyes, despite the efforts of our masters to keep us ignorant. Eliza worked in the big house as a seamstress and lady's maid, her quick fingers and gentle manner making her valuable to Mistress Harrington and her daughters. But it was that very beauty and intelligence that had caught the attention of Benjamin Harrington, and I had begun to notice the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. There was a hunger in his gaze that made my blood run cold, a predatory calculation that spoke of intentions that would destroy my sister's innocence and possibly her life. "James," Eliza said to me one evening as we sat outside the slave quarters, her voice carrying a worry that she tried to hide. "Master Benjamin has been different lately. He asked me to stay late to help with his correspondence, and he stands too close when he's giving me instructions. Yesterday, he touched my shoulder in a way that didn't feel right." "Has he done anything more than that?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Not yet, but I can see it in his eyes, the way he looks at me when his parents aren't around. I'm scared, James. I don't know what to do." I took her hands in mine, feeling how they trembled despite her efforts to appear brave. "You stay close to the other house slaves when you're working. Don't ever be alone with him if you can help it. And if he tries anything at all, you come tell me immediately. What could you do? He's the master's son. If you tried to protect me, they'd kill you. And let me worry about that. You just promise me you'll be careful." Eliza nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The understanding that in our world a slave girl's virtue was worth less than a broken piece of china. If Benjamin Harrington decided to take what he wanted from her, there would be no legal recourse, no protection, no justice except what I might be able to provide with my own hands. But I was one man against an entire system designed to protect white men's privileges, while denying slaves any rights at all. If I attacked Benjamin Harrington, I would be hanged or burned alive, and Eliza would be left defenseless against his revenge. I needed a different solution, something more subtle than violence, but more effective than prayer. The answer came to me 3 weeks later, when I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone, and set in motion the events that would ultimately destroy both our lives. I was working in the cotton fields near the big house, when I heard voices coming from Master Harrington's study, the window of which was open to catch the spring breeze. The conversation was between Master Harrington and a man I recognized as Louis Moreau, a slave trader from New Orleans, who specialized in providing young women to the brothel and pleasure houses of that notorious city. "The girl is exactly what you described," Moreau was saying in his thick Creole accent. "She young, beautiful, intelligent enough to be trained for the finer establishments. My clients in New Orleans would pay handsomely for such merchandise." "Eliza is one of my most valuable house slaves," Master Harrington replied. "It would take a substantial offer to convince me to part with her. I'm prepared to offer $1,800. That's more than twice what you paid for her originally, and far more than you could expect from any other buyer." $1,800 is tempting, but I'd need to consider the impact on my household operations. Eliza has skills that would be difficult to replace. Think of it this way, Mr. Harrington. The girl is 16 now at the peak of her value. In a few years she'll be older, possibly damaged by childbearing or disease. This may be your only opportunity to realize maximum profit from your investment. You make a compelling argument, Moreau. When would you need to take possession? "And within the month, I have a ship leaving New Orleans in 6 weeks, bound for Havana. The Cuban market for such girls. .6 interrupted Beshi. Gun, space hiye yache. Yekane space drakar sekane, space dio YouTube video script. The slave brother who sold his sister to save her life. The deal that destroyed them both. 1858. Intro. 0:00:45. Dramatic music swells. Quick cuts of cotton fields, chains, a flickering lantern in a dark barn. Narrator. Deep, urgent voice. Imagine this. It's 1858, Virginia. A 24-year-old enslaved man named James makes a choice no brother should ever have to make. He steals $950 from his master's safe, not for himself, but to sell his own 16-year-old sister, Eliza, to a stranger. Why? Because the alternative is unspeakable. A one-way ticket to a New Orleans brothel, then a Cuban sugar hell where she'd be worked to death. This isn't just a story of betrayal. It's a story of love so fierce it demands sacrifice, courage that defies a nation, and a legacy that outlives them both. Hit that like button if you believe love can conquer evil, and subscribe so you never miss a story like this. Let's dive in. My name is James, and I was 24 years old when I learned that sometimes the greatest act of love requires the greatest betrayal, and that saving someone's life might cost you everything you hold dear, including their love for you. It was the spring of 1858 in Virginia, where the dogwood trees bloomed white against the red clay soil, and the air carried the scent of magnolia blossoms that masked the stench of human misery. I worked as a field hand on the Harrington plantation, one of the largest cotton operations in the county, where 300 souls labored under conditions that would have shamed the devil himself. Master Nathaniel Harrington was a man of perhaps 50 years with graying hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to calculate the monetary value of everything they looked upon, including the human beings he owned. He prided himself on running an efficient operation, which meant extracting maximum profit from his property while spending as little as possible on their care and feeding. But it was his son, Benjamin Harrington, who truly embodied the evil that slavery could produce in the hearts of white men. At 26, Benjamin was handsome in the way that made him popular with Richmond society, but beneath his charming exterior lay a cruelty that seemed to spring from some poisoned well deep in his soul. He took particular pleasure in tormenting the female slaves, using his position of absolute power to satisfy twisted desires that grew more depraved with each passing year. My sister Eliza was 16 years old, beautiful in the way that made her both blessed and cursed in the world of slavery. She had inherited our mother's delicate features and graceful bearing, along with an intelligence that shone in her dark eyes. Despite the efforts of our masters to keep us ignorant, Eliza worked in the big house as a seamstress and lady's maid, her quick fingers and gentle manner making her valuable to Mistress Harrington and her daughters. But it was that very beauty and intelligence that had caught the attention of Benjamin Harrington, and I had begun to notice the way he looked at her when he thought no one was watching. There was a hunger in his gaze that made my blood run cold, a predatory calculation that spoke of intentions that would destroy my sister's innocence and possibly her life. "James," Eliza said to me one evening as we sat outside the slave quarters, her voice carrying a worry that she tried to hide. Master Benjamin has been different lately. He asked me to stay late to help with his correspondence, and he stands too close when he's giving me instructions. Yesterday he touched my shoulder in a way that didn't feel right. Has he done anything more than that? I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Not yet, but I can see it in his eyes, the way he looks at me when his parents aren't around. I'm scared, James. I don't know what to do. I took her hands in mine, feeling how they trembled despite her efforts to appear brave. You stay close to the other house slaves when you're working. Don't ever be alone with him if you can help it. And if he tries anything at all, you come tell me immediately. What could you do? He's the master's son. If you tried to protect me, they'd kill you. And let me worry about that. You just promise me you'll be careful. Eliza nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. The understanding that in our world a slave girl's virtue was worth less than a broken piece of china. If Benjamin Harrington decided to take what he wanted from her, there would be no legal recourse, no protection, no justice, except what I might be able to provide with my own hands. But I was one man against an entire system designed to protect white men's privileges while denying slaves any rights at all. If I attacked Benjamin Harrington, I would be hanged or burned alive, and Eliza would be left defenseless against his revenge. I needed a different solution, something more subtle than violence but more effective than prayer. The answer came to me 3 weeks later, when I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone and set in motion the events that would ultimately destroy both our lives. I was working in the cotton fields near the big house when I heard voices coming from Master Harrington's study, the window of which was open to catch the spring breeze. The conversation was between Master Harrington and a man I recognized as Louis Moreau, a slave trader from New Orleans, who specialized in providing young women to the brothel and pleasure houses of that notorious city. The girl is exactly what you described, Moreau was saying in his thick Creole accent. She young, beautiful, intelligent enough to be trained for the finer establishments. My clients in New Orleans would pay handsomely for such merchandise. Eliza is one of my most valuable house slaves, Master Harrington replied. It would take a substantial offer to convince me to part with her. I'm prepared to offer $1,800. That's more than twice what you paid for her originally, and far more than you could expect from any other buyer. $1,800 is tempting, but I'd need to consider the impact on my household operations. Eliza has skills that would be difficult to replace. Think of it this way, Mr. Harrington. The girl is 16 now at the peak of her value. In a few years she'll be older, possibly damaged by childbearing or disease. This may be your only opportunity to realize maximum profit from your investment. You make a compelling argument, Moreau. When would you need to take possession? And within the month I have a ship leaving New Orleans in 6 weeks, bound for Havana. The Cuban market for such girls is particularly lucrative right now. Cuba. I thought you were selling to New Orleans brothel. The New Orleans market is saturated at the moment. Cuba offers better opportunities, and the clients there are less particular about the condition in which the merchandise arrives. The implication of Moreau's words hit me like a physical blow. Eliza wasn't just being sold to a brothel. She was being sold into sexual slavery in a foreign country, where she would be worked to death in conditions that made American slavery look humane by comparison. Once she was on that ship to Cuba, I would never see her again, and she would never have any hope of freedom or rescue. I continued working in the field, my hands moving automatically through the familiar motions of cotton picking while my mind raced through possible solutions to an impossible problem. I couldn't prevent the sale through legal means. Slaves had no legal standing to challenge their master's decisions. I couldn't physically prevent it without getting myself killed and leaving Eliza defenseless. I couldn't help her escape without resources, connections, and a plan that would take months to develop. But there was one possibility, desperate and dangerous, that might save Eliza's life while destroying my own. The Bradford plantation, which bordered the Harrington property to the north, was owned by a man named Elias Bradford, who had a reputation for treating his slaves with unusual kindness. Bradford was a Quaker who had inherited the plantation from his father and was reportedly uncomfortable with the institution of slavery, though he had not yet found a way to free his workers without bankrupting himself. More importantly, I had heard rumors that Bradford was secretly helping slaves escape to the north, providing them with money, documents, and connections to the Underground Railroad. If I could somehow get Eliza transferred to the Bradford plantation, she might have a chance at eventual freedom rather than certain death in Cuba. The plan that formed in my mind was simple in concept, but terrifyingly complex in execution. I would steal enough money from Master Harrington's safe to purchase Eliza myself, then arrange to sell her to Bradford under the pretense of a legitimate business transaction. Bradford, if he was truly the man his reputation suggested, would understand what I was trying to accomplish and help Eliza escape to freedom. The risks were enormous. If I was caught stealing from Master Harrington, I would be tortured to death as an example to other slaves. If Bradford refused to cooperate or betrayed my plan to the authorities, both Eliza and I would face consequences too terrible to contemplate. Even if everything went perfectly, I would be a thief and a fugitive, hunted by every law enforcement agency in the state. But the alternative was watching my sister disappear into a hell from which there could be no return. I spent the next week studying Master Harrington's routines, learning when he accessed his safe and how the security of the big house was arranged. The safe was located in his study behind a painting of his late father, and I had observed him opening it on several occasions when I was working near the house. The combination appeared to be his father's birth date, a piece of information I had gleaned from conversations among the house slaves. More challenging was the question of how to approach Bradford without arousing suspicion. I couldn't simply walk onto his plantation and announce my intentions. Such behavior would be reported to the authorities immediately. I needed an intermediary, someone who could make contact with Bradford and explain the situation without revealing my identity. The answer came from an unexpected source. Old Isaac, a slave who worked in the Harrington stables, had a brother named Caleb who worked on the Bradford plantation. The two men occasionally met at the property line when their duties brought them to that area. And Isaac had mentioned that Caleb spoke highly of his master's character. "Isaac," I said one evening as we sat outside the quarters, "I need to ask you about your brother Caleb. Is he someone who can be trusted with important information?" "Caleb's a good man," Isaac replied carefully. "Why are you asking?" "I might need to get a message to Master Bradford, something that couldn't go through normal channels. Would Caleb be willing to help with something like that?" Isaac studied my face in the firelight. His weathered features creased with concern. "This about your sister? About what Master Benjamin has been planning for her? You know about that. House slaves talk. Field slaves listen. We all know that Moreau fellow been sniffing around, and we all know what kind of business he's in. Question is, what you planning to do about it? I'm planning to save her, but I need help and I need people I can trust to keep their mouths shut. Saving a slave girl from what's planned for her? That's dangerous business, James. Could get a lot of people killed. And I know that's why I'm not asking anyone else to take risks. I just need someone to carry a message." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire as he considered my request. "Caleb's a good man," he said finally. "And Master Bradford's got a reputation for helping folks when he can. I'll talk to my brother, see if he's willing to carry a message. But James, you be careful. Whatever you're planning, it's going to be dangerous for everyone involved. I know, but I can't let them take her to Cuba. I'd rather die trying to save her than live knowing I did nothing. Then God help you, boy, because you're going to need all the help you can get." The message I composed for Master Bradford was carefully worded to convey my intentions, without providing evidence that could be used against me if it fell into the wrong hands. I wrote it on a piece of paper torn from a discarded ledger using charcoal from the forge to form letters that I hoped would be legible despite my limited education. Master Bradford for the message read, "A young slave girl on the Harrington plantation is in danger of being sold to Louis Moreau for transport to Cuba. Her brother wishes to purchase her freedom, but lacks the legal standing to do so. He seeks a Christian man who might be willing to facilitate such a transaction for humanitarian purposes. If you are such a man, please send word through Caleb. Time is of the essence as the sale is planned for next week. A friend of freedom." Isaac delivered the message to his brother Caleb during one of their clandestine meetings at the property line. And within 2 days, I had a response that filled me with both hope and terror. "Tell your friend." Bradford's message read, that I am indeed a Christian man who believes in helping those in need. If he can provide the necessary funds, I will facilitate the transaction he describes. The girl will be treated with kindness and given opportunities for education and eventual freedom. Have him send details of his proposal through the same channel. The response confirmed what I had hoped. Bradford was willing to help and he understood the true nature of what I was proposing. But it also made clear that I would need to provide the money for Eliza's purchase, which meant stealing a substantial sum from Master Harrington's safe. I had observed that Harrington typically kept between $2,000 and $3,000 in cash in his safe, money that he used for various business transactions and emergency expenses. $950 would be enough to purchase Eliza at a fair market price, while leaving enough remaining that the theft might not be immediately noticed. The plan I developed was simple, but required precise timing and nerves of steel. On Tuesday evenings, Master Harrington typically spent several hours in Richmond attending meetings of various business and social organizations. During his absence, the big house was guarded only by the house slaves and Mistress Harrington, who usually retired early with a bottle of laudanum to ease her chronic headaches. I would enter the house through the kitchen, where I had legitimate reasons to be present if questioned. From there, I would make my way to the study, open the safe, take the money, and escape before anyone noticed my presence. The entire operation should take no more than 15 minutes, and if everything went according to plan, the theft wouldn't be discovered until Master Harrington returned from Richmond. But first, I needed to finalize the arrangements with Bradford and ensure that Eliza would be safely transferred before the theft was discovered. "Caleb," I said through Isaac, "tell Master Bradford that I can provide $950 for the purchase. The transaction must take place this Friday, as the girl is scheduled to be sold to Moreau on Sunday. If Master Bradford agrees, I will deliver the money to a location of his choosing on Thursday night." Bradford's response came back within hours. "Tell your friend that I agree to his proposal. I will meet him at the old mill on Willow Creek at midnight on Thursday. He should come alone and bring the money. I will handle all legal aspects of the transaction and ensure the girl's safety. May God bless this endeavor." The old mill on Willow Creek was an abandoned structure that sat on the border between the Harrington and Bradford properties, accessible from both plantations, but isolated enough to ensure privacy. It was the perfect location for a clandestine meeting, though the very secrecy of the arrangement made me nervous about potential betrayal. Tuesday evening arrived with agonizing slowness. I went about my normal duties in the cotton fields, trying to appear calm and focused, while my mind raced through every detail of the plan. As the sun set and Master Harrington prepared to leave for Richmond, I positioned myself near the big house, waiting for the right moment to make my move. "You seem nervous tonight," observed Thomas, a fellow field hand who had been working beside me all day. "Something troubling you?" "Just tired," I replied, though my hands were shaking with anxiety. "Long day in the fields." "Well, you better get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be another long day." If only he knew, I thought, that tomorrow might be my last day on Earth. Master Harrington departed for Richmond at 6:30, his carriage disappearing down the tree-lined drive that led to the main road. I waited another hour for the household to settle into its evening routine, then made my way toward the big house through the gathering darkness. The kitchen door was unlocked, as it always was during the evening hours when the cook might need to step outside for water or supplies. I slipped inside, my heart pounding so loudly that I was certain everyone in the house could hear it. The kitchen was empty, the cook having finished her duties and retired to the quarters for the night. I moved through the familiar layout of the house, staying in the shadows and avoiding the areas where I might encounter Mistress Harrington or the house slaves. The study was located at the front of the house, its windows facing the drive where Master Harrington's return would be visible from a considerable distance. The safe was exactly where I had observed it, hidden behind the portrait of Master Harrington's father. My hands trembled as I moved the painting aside and began working the combination lock using the birth date that I had memorized from overheard conversations. The lock clicked open on my third attempt, revealing stacks of currency, legal documents, and jewelry that represented more wealth than I had ever seen in one place. I took $950 in various denominations, leaving the rest undisturbed in hopes that the theft would not be immediately obvious. As I prepared to leave the study, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside. My blood turned to ice as I realized that someone was approaching the room where I was committing the crime that would either save my sister or get me killed. "Benjamin!" Mistress Harrington's voice called out from the hallway. "Is that you? I thought I heard someone moving around down here." I quickly closed the safe and replaced the painting, then looked around desperately for a hiding place or escape route. The study had only one door, and Mistress Harrington was approaching from that direction. The windows were too high and too visible from the front drive. I was trapped. "Benjamin, answer me." Mistress Harrington's voice was closer now, and I could see the glow of her candle approaching the study door. In desperation, I dropped to the floor and crawled under Master Harrington's massive oak desk, pulling my legs up and trying to make myself as small as possible. The space was cramped and uncomfortable, but it was the only hiding place available. Mistress Harrington entered the study, her candle casting dancing shadows on the walls as she looked around the room. "Strange," she muttered to herself. "I was certain I heard someone in here." She moved around the room, checking behind furniture and examining the windows to ensure they were properly locked. At one point, she approached the desk where I was hiding, and I held my breath as her candle illuminated the floor just inches from my concealed position. "Must have been the wind," she said finally, though she didn't sound entirely convinced. "This old house makes so many noises." She left the study, but I remained hidden under the desk for another 10 minutes, listening to her footsteps as she moved through the house, and eventually returned to her bedroom upstairs. Only when I was certain that she had settled for the night did I emerge from my hiding place and make my way back to the kitchen. The return journey to the slave quarters felt like the longest walk of my life. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential witness. Every sound suggested pursuit and capture. But I reached my cabin without incident, the stolen money hidden in my clothing like a burning coal against my chest. I spent the rest of the night lying awake, staring at the ceiling and trying to calm my racing heart. In less than 24 hours, I would meet with Master Bradford and complete the transaction that would either save Eliza's life or seal my own doom. There was no turning back now. The money was stolen, the plan was in motion, and my sister's fate hung in the balance. Wednesday passed with agonizing slowness. I worked in the cotton fields as usual, trying to maintain the appearance of normalcy while my mind focused on the evening's crucial meeting. Eliza seemed unusually quiet during our brief encounter at the midday meal, and I wondered if she sensed that something momentous was about to happen. "James," she said as we sat in the shade of a large oak tree, "I had a strange dream last night. I dreamed that I was flying, soaring high above the plantation and the fields, free as a bird. Do you think dreams like that mean anything?" "Maybe they mean that freedom is closer than you think," I replied, hoping that my words would prove prophetic. "I hope so. Sometimes I feel like I can't breathe in this place, like the walls are closing in around me. If I don't get away soon, I think I might just disappear entirely." "Don't talk like that. You're stronger than you know. And there are people who care about you. People who would do anything to protect you. Like you. Especially like me." Eliza smiled and squeezed my hand, unaware that she was touching the same fingers that had stolen $950 to purchase her freedom. In a few hours, if everything went according to plan, she would be the property of a man who believed in liberation rather than exploitation, and I would be a thief whose crime would eventually be discovered, leading to consequences that I preferred not to contemplate. "Whatever happens," I said, looking into her eyes with an intensity that seemed to surprise her, "remember that you are loved. Remember that someone cared enough about you to risk everything for your safety." "James, you're scaring me. Why are you talking like this? Just remember what I said. Promise me, I promise. But I don't understand why you're being so serious. You will someday. And when you do, I hope you'll forgive me for the choices I had to make." The conversation ended when the overseer's horn called us back to work, but Eliza's puzzled expression stayed with me for the rest of the day. She knew something was happening, even if she didn't understand what it was. I only hoped that when she finally learned the truth, she would understand that everything I had done was motivated by love. Midnight approached with the inevitability of a death sentence. I made my way through the darkness toward Willow Creek, following paths that I had walked since childhood, but that now seemed foreign and threatening. The money was hidden in a cloth bag tied around my waist. Its weight, a constant reminder of the crime I had committed and the risk I was taking. The old mill appeared through the trees like a ghost from another era. Its broken wheel and crumbling walls testament to dreams that had died long ago. A single figure stood in the shadows near the building's entrance. Master Bradford, waiting for a meeting that would determine my sister's fate and my own. "You came," he said as I approached, his voice carrying a mixture of relief and apprehension. "I gave my word," I replied, though my voice was barely above a whisper. "Do you have the money?" I handed him the cloth bag, watching as he counted the bills by moonlight. $950 as agreed, he said. "This is more money than most slaves see in a lifetime. How did you acquire such a sum?" "I'd rather not say. The less you know about that, the safer you'll be. You'll so." Bradford nodded, understanding the implications of my reluctance to explain. "Very well. I'll complete the purchase tomorrow morning using the story that I need additional domestic help and heard that Harrington might be willing to sell the girl. The transaction will appear completely legitimate. Soon after that, I'll give her a choice. She can remain on my plantation as a free servant with wages and the opportunity for education, or I can provide her with documents and connections that will allow her to travel north to true freedom. Either way, she'll be safe from the fate that Moreau had planned for her." "She'll choose freedom," I said with certainty. "Eliza's always dreamed of seeing the world beyond these plantations. Then I'll make sure she has that opportunity. But what about you? Once Harrington discovers the theft, he'll suspect everyone who had access to the house. You'll be in grave danger. Eliza's safety is worth any price I have to pay." "You're a brave man," Bradford said, his voice heavy with respect and sorrow. "A loving brother. I'll make sure Eliza knows what you sacrificed for her freedom." "No," I said quickly. "Don't tell her about the theft or about this meeting. Let her think the sale was just a business transaction. If she knew what I had done, she might try to come back to help me, and that would put her in danger. But surely she deserves to know the truth about your sacrifice. Maybe someday when she's safe and free and far away from here. But not now. Now she needs to focus on building a new life, not mourning for a brother who made his own choices." Bradford was quiet for a moment, studying my face in the moonlight. "As you wish. But I want you to know that your sacrifice will not be forgotten. If there's ever anything I can do to help you, just take care of my sister. That's all I ask." We shook hands in the shadow of the old mill. Two men from different worlds, united by a common desire to see justice done and innocence protected. Then Bradford disappeared into the darkness, carrying with him the money that would purchase Eliza's freedom and the knowledge of a crime that could get me killed. I made my way back to the slave quarters, knowing that I had set in motion events that could not be stopped or reversed. By tomorrow evening, Eliza would be the property of a man who believed in freedom rather than exploitation, and I would be living on borrowed time, waiting for the moment when Master Harrington discovered his loss and began looking for someone to blame. But as I lay in my cabin, listening to the night sounds of the plantation, I felt a peace that I had never experienced before. Whatever happened to me, Eliza would be safe. Whatever price I had to pay, it was worth her freedom. The transaction was complete. The die was cast. And somewhere in the darkness, my sister slept peacefully, unaware that her life was about to change forever. Thursday morning dawned clear and bright with the kind of perfect spring weather that made the horrors of slavery seem almost surreal. I worked in the cotton fields as usual, my hands moving automatically through the familiar motions, while my mind focused on the drama that was unfolding at the big house. Around 9:30, I saw Master Bradford's carriage approaching the Harrington plantation, its occupant arriving for what would appear to be a routine business call. From my position in the fields, I could see him being welcomed by Master Harrington and escorted into the house for what I knew would be negotiations for Eliza's purchase. "Wonder what Master Bradford wants with Master Harrington," observed Thomas, who was working in the row next to mine. "Don't often see neighbors calling on each other during working hours." "Probably just business," I replied, though my heart was racing with anxiety about the outcome of their meeting. Hope it don't mean more work for us. Last time we had visitors from another plantation, they ended up borrowing half our crew for some project. I continued picking cotton, trying to appear calm, while every fiber of my being was focused on the big house where my sister's fate was being decided. The meeting seemed to last forever, though it was probably only an hour before I saw Master Bradford's carriage departing, this time with an additional passenger whose identity I couldn't make out from such a distance. But I knew it was Eliza. The plan had worked. She was now the property of a man who would give her the chance at freedom that she had always dreamed of. The confirmation came at the midday meal, when the house slaves gathered with the field hands to share the day's gossip and news. Master Harrington sold Eliza to Master Bradford, announced Ruth, one of the kitchen workers. He said he needed the money for some business investment, and Master Bradford was willing to pay a good price for a skilled seamstress. "Eliza's gone?" asked old Isaac, feigning surprise, though he knew exactly what had happened. Just like that. Just like that. Master Bradford's carriage took her away this morning along with her few belongings. She seemed surprised by the whole thing, but she didn't argue. Probably figured any change might be for the better. I felt a mixture of relief and heartbreak as I listened to the conversation. Relief that the plan had worked and Eliza was now safe from Moreau and his Cuban brothel. Heartbreak that I might never see her again, and that she had no idea why she had been sold or what I had sacrificed to make it happen. "Shame to see her go," said Hannah, another house slave. "Eliza was a good girl, always willing to help others. Hope Master Bradford treats her well." "And from what I hear, Master Bradford's decent to his people," replied Ruth. "She'll probably be better off there than she was here, especially with Master Benjamin always sniffing around her like a dog in heat." The conversation continued, but I stopped listening, lost in thoughts about Eliza's new life and the consequences that would soon catch up with me. The theft hadn't been discovered yet, but it was only a matter of time. Master Harrington would need to access his safe for some business purpose, and when he did, he would find $950 missing. The discovery came sooner than I had expected. I was working in the fields late that afternoon when I heard the sound of shouting coming from the direction of the big house. The voice was Master Harrington's, raised in anger to a level that could be heard across the entire plantation. Within minutes, the overseer's horn was blowing, calling all slaves to assemble in the yard in front of the big house. This is it, I thought, as I joined the crowd of confused and frightened slaves. This is where it all ends. Master Harrington stood on the front porch of the big house, his face red with rage and his hands shaking with fury. Beside him stood the overseer, Coleman, holding a whip that he seemed eager to use. "Someone has stolen from me," Harrington shouted, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Someone has broken into my safe and taken $950. This is theft of the most serious kind, and I will not tolerate it." A murmur of fear and confusion ran through the crowd of slaves. Theft was one of the most serious crimes a slave could commit, punishable by torture, mutilation, or death, depending on the master's mood and the value of what was stolen. "I know one of you is responsible for this crime," Harrington continued, "and I'm going to find out who it is, even if I have to question every last one of you under the lash. Someone will talk, someone will confess, and when they do, they'll wish they had never been born." I stood in the crowd, trying to keep my expression neutral while my heart pounded with terror. I had known this moment would come, had prepared myself for it, as much as anyone could prepare for their own destruction. But the reality of facing torture and death was more frightening than I had imagined. "We'll start with the house slaves," Coleman announced, cracking his whip for emphasis. "Anyone who had access to the big house in the past week will be questioned individually, and I guarantee you will get the truth out of someone before this day is over." The interrogations began immediately with house slaves being dragged one by one into the barn, where Coleman conducted his questioning sessions. The sounds that emerged from that building, screams of pain, pleas for mercy, the crack of the whip against human flesh, created an atmosphere of terror that affected every person on the plantation. But the house slaves knew nothing about the theft, because I had been careful not to involve anyone else in my plan. They could be tortured for hours without revealing information they didn't possess, which would only increase Coleman's frustration and make him more brutal in his methods. As the afternoon wore on, and no confession was obtained, Master Harrington's rage grew more intense. He began expanding the investigation to include field hands who might have had access to the big house, and I knew it was only a matter of time before my turn came. "James Thompson," Coleman called out as the sun began to set. "You're next." I walked toward the barn with as much dignity as I could muster, knowing that I was walking toward my own death, but determined to face it with courage. The money I had stolen was already serving its purpose. Eliza was safe with Master Bradford, probably already learning about the opportunities for freedom that awaited her. Whatever happened to me now, that knowledge would sustain me through whatever tortures lay ahead. The inside of the barn had been transformed into a chamber of horrors. Chains hung from the rafters. Instruments of torture were laid out on a wooden table, and the floor was stained with the blood of previous victims. Coleman stood in the center of it all like a demon in his element, his whip coiled and ready for use. "James Thompson," he said, his voice carrying a satisfaction that chilled my blood. "Field hand, 24 years old. Been on this plantation his whole life. Have you got any idea why you're here, boy?" "No, sir," I replied, though we both knew I was lying. "Someone stole $950 from Master Harrington's safe. That's a lot of money. More than most slaves see in a lifetime. You know anything about that?" "No, sir. I work in the fields. I don't have access to the big house." "That's interesting because several people saw you near the big house on Tuesday evening. What were you doing there?" I had prepared for this question, knowing that my presence near the house might have been observed. "I was looking for my sister Eliza, sir. I wanted to talk to her about something, but I couldn't find her." "Your sister Eliza, the one who got sold to Master Bradford this morning. Convenient timing, don't you think?" "I don't understand what you mean, sir." Coleman smiled, an expression that held no warmth or humor. "I think you understand perfectly. I think you stole that money to buy your sister's freedom. I think you made some kind of deal with Master Bradford to get her away from here. And I think you're going to confess to that crime right now, or I'm going to make you wish you had never been born." "I don't know anything about any theft, sir. I'm just a field hand who works hard and keeps his head down. We'll see about that." What followed was the most brutal experience of my life. Coleman was an expert in the art of torture, knowing exactly how to inflict maximum pain without causing death too quickly. He used whips, brands, knives, and other instruments to break down my resistance, all while demanding that I confess to the theft, and revealed the details of my arrangement with Master Bradford. But I had made a decision before entering that barn. I would not confess, no matter what they did to me. Confessing would implicate Master Bradford in the conspiracy, which could lead to Eliza being returned to Master Harrington and sold to Moreau. After all, as long as I maintained my innocence, there was no evidence connecting Bradford to the theft, and Eliza would remain safe. "Just tell me the truth, James," Coleman said after hours of torture had failed to break my resolve. "Tell me you stole the money. Tell me how you did it, and this can all be over. Keep lying to me, and I'll make sure you die slowly and painfully." "I didn't steal anything," I gasped between waves of agony. "I don't know what happened to the money. You're a stubborn one. I'll give you that. But everyone breaks eventually. Everyone has a limit to how much pain they can endure." The torture continued through the night and into the next day. Coleman was relentless in his efforts to extract a confession, using every technique in his arsenal to break down my resistance. But I held on to one thought that gave me strength. Somewhere Eliza was safe and free, building a new life away from the horrors of slavery. That knowledge was worth any amount of suffering. By Friday evening, it was clear that I was dying. The torture had inflicted damage that my body couldn't survive, and Coleman was running out of time to get the confession he wanted. Master Harrington visited the barn to assess the situation, his face grim as he looked at my broken body. "He's not going to confess," Coleman reported. "I've tried everything, but he won't admit to the theft. Either he's innocent or he's got more willpower than any slave I've ever encountered." "He's not innocent," Harrington replied. "The timing is too convenient. The circumstances too suspicious. He stole that money probably to help his sister escape. But if he won't confess, there's nothing more we can do." "What do you want me to do with him?" "Let him die, but make it slow as an example to the others." I want every slave on this plantation to understand what happens to thieves. They left me chained in the barn, my body broken and my life ebbing away with each labored breath. But my spirit was at peace because I had accomplished what I set out to do. Eliza was safe, and I had protected the secret of how her freedom had been purchased. As I lay dying in that blood-stained barn, I thought about my sister and the new life she was building. I imagined her learning to read and write, discovering talents and abilities that slavery had never allowed her to develop. I pictured her eventually traveling north to true freedom, where she could live as a human being rather than property. Most of all, I hoped that someday she would understand why I had made the choices I did, why I had sacrificed my life to save hers. I hoped she would forgive me for the deception, for letting her believe that her sale to Master Bradford had been just a business transaction rather than an act of love that had cost me everything. I died on Saturday morning, just as the sun was rising over the cotton fields where I had worked for 24 years. My last thought was of Eliza, free and safe, and building a life that I would never see, but had made possible through my sacrifice. The official cause of death was listed as injuries sustained during interrogation of suspected thief. Master Harrington never recovered his $950, and the case was eventually closed as unsolved. But everyone on the plantation knew what had really happened. A brother had died to save his sister, paying the ultimate price for an act of love that had set her free. Eliza's new life at the Bradford plantation began with confusion and cautious hope. She had been given a comfortable room in the servants' quarters, far superior to anything she had known at the Harrington plantation, and Master Bradford had immediately made it clear that her treatment would be different from what she had experienced before. "Eliza," he said on her first morning, as they sat in his study, discussing her duties, "I want you to understand that things work differently here. You'll be treated with respect and kindness, and you'll have opportunities to learn and grow that you've never had before." "Thank you, sir," Eliza replied, though she was puzzled by his unusual manner. Most masters didn't concern themselves with their slaves' personal development. "I also want you to know that you have choices here. You can remain as a domestic servant with wages and the opportunity for education. Or if you prefer, I can help you travel north to places where you would be truly free." Eliza stared at him in amazement, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Free, sir? You mean really free? Really free? Free to make your own decisions, to live where you choose to work for wages rather than as property. It would be dangerous. There are slave catchers who would try to bring you back, but it's possible. Why would you do that for me, sir? You just bought me. Why would you want to set me free?" Bradford was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. He had promised James not to reveal the true circumstances of Eliza's purchase, but he wanted to give her some understanding of the sacrifice that had been made for her freedom. "Let's just say that someone who cares about you very much wanted to make sure you had these opportunities. Someone who believed you deserved better than what fate had planned for you. Someone who cares about me. Who could that be? I'm not at liberty to say, but I can tell you that this person made significant sacrifices to ensure your safety and freedom." Eliza spent the next several days adjusting to her new circumstances, while trying to understand what Master Bradford had meant about someone making sacrifices for her. The only person she could think of who cared that much about her welfare was her brother James, but he was just a field hand with no money or influence. How could he have arranged for her to be sold to a kind master who offered her freedom? The answer came in fragments through conversations with other slaves on the Bradford plantation, who had connections to the broader slave community in the region. Word traveled fast among enslaved people, and news of dramatic events was shared through an informal network that connected plantations throughout the county. Heard there was trouble at the Harrington place mentioned Caleb Isaac's brother during one of Eliza's first weeks at Bradford. Someone stole money from Master Harrington's safe and they tortured a slave to death trying to get a confession. "Tortured someone to death?" Eliza asked, her blood running cold. "Who was it?" "A field hand named James Thompson. They say he died without confessing even though everyone knew he was guilty." "James Thompson?" Eliza's voice was barely a whisper. That's my brother, your brother. Lord have mercy. I'm sorry, girl. I didn't know." Eliza felt the world spinning around her as the implications of Caleb's words sank in. James was dead, tortured to death for stealing money from Master Harrington. And the timing of his death, just days after her sale to Master Bradford, suggested a connection that she was only beginning to understand. "When did this happen?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Just a few days ago. Right after you got sold. From what I heard, folks are saying the timing was suspicious, like maybe the theft and your sale were connected somehow." That night, Eliza lay awake in her comfortable bed, trying to piece together the truth about her brother's death and her own sudden change of circumstances. The $950 that had been stolen from Master Harrington's safe, could that have been the money used to purchase her from him? Had James somehow stolen that money to arrange her sale to Master Bradford? The more she thought about it, the more certain she became that James had orchestrated her escape from the Harrington plantation, knowing that Master Benjamin had plans for her that would have destroyed her life. Her brother had somehow learned about the danger she faced and had taken desperate action to save her, even though he must have known it would cost him his life. "Oh, James," she whispered into the darkness, tears streaming down her face. "What did you do? What terrible price did you pay for my freedom?" Over the following weeks, Eliza gathered more information about her brother's death through the slave network that connected plantations throughout the region. The story that emerged was one of incredible courage and sacrifice. A young man who had risked everything to save his sister from a fate worse than death. James never confessed. Old Isaac told her during one of his visits to see his brother Caleb. They tortured him for 3 days, but he never admitted to taking that money. Died protecting someone, though nobody knows who. "He was protecting me," Eliza said quietly. "He stole that money to buy my freedom, and he died rather than confess and implicate the people who helped him." "You think your brother was the thief?" "I know he was, and I know he did it, because he loved me more than his own life." The knowledge of James's sacrifice filled Eliza with a complex mixture of grief, guilt, and determination. She mourned the loss of the brother who had been her closest friend and protector throughout their childhood. She felt guilty that her freedom had come at such a terrible price, that James had died alone and in agony, while she lived in comfort and safety. But she also felt a burning determination to make his sacrifice meaningful, to build a life that would honor his memory and justify the price he had paid for her freedom. "Master Bradford," she said one morning, approaching him in his study with a resolve that surprised them both. "I want to go north. I want to be truly free the way my brother wanted me to be. But are you certain? The journey is dangerous, and life in the north can be difficult for former slaves. I'm certain my brother died to give me this chance, and I won't waste it by staying here in safety. I want to learn, to grow, to become someone he would be proud of." "Very well. I'll make the arrangements. But first, let me teach you to read and write properly. You'll need those skills to survive in the north." For the next 6 months, Eliza received an education that transformed her understanding of the world and her place in it. Master Bradford taught her to read and write with fluency, to perform mathematical calculations, and to understand the political and social forces that shaped American society. More importantly, he taught her about the Underground Railroad and the network of people who helped slaves escape to freedom. "There are good people in this world," he told her. "People who believe that slavery is wrong and are willing to risk their lives to help others escape it. Your brother was one of those people in his own way. He saw injustice and chose to fight it even though it cost him everything." "I want to be like him," Eliza said. "I want to help other people escape slavery, to make sure his sacrifice helps more than just me. Then you'll need to be smart, careful, and brave. The work is dangerous, but it's also the most important work anyone can do." In the spring of 1859, nearly a year after James's death, Eliza began her journey north. Master Bradford had provided her with forged papers identifying her as a free woman, along with money and connections to Underground Railroad conductors who would help her reach safety. The journey took 3 weeks, traveling mostly at night and hiding during the day in safe houses operated by abolitionists and free blacks who risked their lives to help fugitive slaves. Eliza was constantly aware that capture would mean a return to slavery and possibly death, but she was sustained by the knowledge that she was fulfilling her brother's dream for her freedom. She finally reached Baltimore in June 1859, where she was welcomed by a community of former slaves and abolitionists who helped her establish a new life. She found work as a seamstress using the skills she had learned at the Harrington plantation to support herself while she continued her education. But Eliza's greatest contribution to the cause of freedom came through her work with the Underground Railroad. She used her knowledge of Southern plantations and slave communities to help other fugitives escape, becoming one of the most effective conductors in the Baltimore network. "Every person I help escape is a tribute to my brother's memory," she would tell other abolitionists. "He died to save one slave me. I'm going to spend my life saving as many as I can." Over the next decade, Eliza helped more than 250 slaves escape to freedom using the network of contacts and safe houses that stretched from the Deep South to Canada. She became known in abolitionist circles as Lily the Seamstress, a mysterious figure who could move through slave communities without arousing suspicion, and who had an uncanny ability to identify slaves who were ready to risk everything for freedom. But Eliza never forgot the price that had been paid for her own freedom, or the brother who had died to make her new life possible. She kept a small portrait of James that had been painted from memory by an artist in Baltimore, and she would often speak to it when she was planning particularly dangerous rescue missions. "Guide me, James," she would whisper. "Help me save them the way you saved me." The Civil War brought new opportunities and new dangers for Eliza's work. As Union armies advanced into the South, they liberated thousands of slaves who needed help adjusting to freedom and finding their place in a changing world. Eliza worked with the Freedmen's Bureau and various charitable organizations to provide education, job training, and support services to former slaves. "Freedom is just the beginning," she would tell the people she helped. "Real freedom means having the skills and knowledge to build a better life for yourself and your children. That's what my brother wanted for me, and that's what I want for all of you." After the war ended, Eliza established a school for former slaves in Baltimore, using money she had saved from her work and donations from abolitionist supporters. The school provided basic education, job training, and support services to help former slaves transition to life as free citizens. The school was named the James Thompson Institute for Freedom in honor of the brother whose sacrifice had made Eliza's life of service possible. Above the entrance was inscribed a quote that Eliza had chosen: "Freedom is not free. It is purchased with sacrifice, sustained by courage, and shared through love." Eliza lived to be 74 years old, dying peacefully in 1906, surrounded by former students and colleagues who had been touched by her life of service. She never married or had children of her own, dedicating her life entirely to the cause of freedom and education. At her funeral, hundreds of people gathered to honor a woman who had transformed her brother's sacrifice into a lifetime of service to others. Former slaves spoke about how she had helped them escape to freedom. Students talked about how she had taught them to read and write. Colleagues remembered her tireless work on behalf of civil rights and education. But perhaps the most moving tribute came from an elderly man named Caleb, Isaac's brother, who had traveled from Virginia to attend the service. Eliza Thompson was a woman who understood the true meaning of freedom. He said she knew that freedom isn't just about escaping slavery. It's about using your freedom to help others escape as well. She spent her whole life honoring her brother's sacrifice by making sure it saved more than just one person. James Thompson died believing he had saved his sister's life. He never knew that he had actually saved hundreds of lives because his sacrifice inspired Eliza to dedicate her life to helping others. That's the real legacy of what happened on that plantation in 1858. Not just one slave's freedom, but a lifetime of service that touched countless lives. Eliza was buried in a cemetery in Baltimore, her grave marked with a simple stone that read, "Eliza Thompson, 1842-1906. She lived free because her brother died brave, teacher, conductor, liberator of souls." But her true monument was the James Thompson Institute for Freedom, which continued to operate for decades after her death, educating thousands of students and carrying on the work that had begun with a brother's desperate decision to steal money to save his sister's life. The story of James and Eliza Thompson became part of the oral tradition of the African American community, passed down through generations as an example of the sacrifices that were made for freedom and the responsibility that comes with that freedom. It was a reminder that liberty is not just a gift to be enjoyed, but a trust to be shared with others who are still struggling for their own liberation. And in the end, that may have been the greatest tribute to James's sacrifice. Not just that his sister lived free, but that she used her freedom to ensure that his death had meaning far beyond what he could have imagined when he made his desperate decision to steal $950 and trade his life for hers. It was not until 1891, 33 years after James's death, that Eliza finally learned the complete truth about her brother's sacrifice. The revelation came through an unexpected source. Old Isaac, who had carried the secret of James's plan for decades, but finally felt compelled to share the full story before his own death. Isaac was 92 years old and dying when he sent word to Eliza in Baltimore, asking her to come south one last time to hear something important about her brother. Despite the risks of returning to the region where she had been enslaved, Eliza made the journey to Virginia. Driven by a need to understand the final pieces of James's story, she found Isaac in a small cabin on what had once been the Harrington plantation, now owned by his grandson, who had purchased the land after the war. The old man was bedridden but alert, his eyes still sharp despite his advanced age. "Eliza Thompson," he said as she entered his cabin. "I've been waiting 30 years to tell you this story, waiting until I was sure you was strong enough to hear it, and until I was close enough to death that it didn't matter who might be listening." "What story, Isaac?" "I thought I knew everything about what James did for me. You know he stole that money to buy your freedom. You know he died rather than confess and implicate Master Bradford. But you don't know why he did it, what he knew that made him so desperate to get you away from here." Isaac struggled to sit up in his bed, his weathered hands gripping Eliza's with surprising strength. "Your brother overheard a conversation between Master Harrington and Louis Moreau, that slave trader from New Orleans. They wasn't planning to sell you to just any brothel, Eliza. They was planning to ship you to Cuba to work in the sugar plantations there until you died. And before that, they was going to let Moreau clients use you however they wanted during the voyage." Eliza felt her blood turn to ice as she absorbed the implications of Isaac's words. She had known that her situation at the Harrington plantation was dangerous, but she had never understood the full horror of what had been planned for her. James knew all this. He heard every word, heard them talking about how much money they could make from a young, pretty slave girl in the Cuban market. Heard them laughing about what would happen to you on that ship. That's when he decided he had to do something, no matter what it cost him. Why didn't he tell me? Why didn't he warn me about what they were planning? Because he knew you'd try to run. And running would have gotten you caught and sold to Moreau anyway. The only way to save you was to arrange a legitimate sale to someone who would treat you right. And the only way to do that was to steal the money to pay for it. Isaac reached under his pillow and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper yellowed with age. "James gave me this the night before he stole that money, made me promise to give it to you if anything happened to him. But then you was gone, sold to Master Bradford, and I didn't know how to find you. Been carrying it ever since, waiting for the right time." Eliza took the paper with trembling hands, recognizing her brother's careful handwriting, despite the faded ink. "My dearest sister Eliza," the letter read, "if you are reading this, then I am probably dead, and you are hopefully free. I want you to know that everything I did because I love you more than my own life. I couldn't let them take you to Cuba. I couldn't let them destroy you the way they've destroyed so many others. If I have to die to keep you safe, then that's a price I'm willing to pay. Don't mourn for me, sister. Live free, live proud, and remember that you are loved. Your brother always, James." Eliza read the letter 3 times before the tears made it impossible to continue. For 33 years, she had lived with the knowledge that James had died to save her, but she had never fully understood the depth of his sacrifice or the horror he had saved her from. "He never expected to survive," she said finally. "He knew from the beginning that saving me would cost him his life." "He knew," Isaac confirmed, "but he also knew that your life was worth more than his own. That's the kind of man your brother was, someone who would rather die than let evil triumph. All these years I've been trying to honor his memory by helping other slaves escape, but I never really understood what he saved me from. Now you do, and now you can tell others, so they understand what slavery really was, what it did to families, what people were willing to sacrifice to protect the ones they loved. Isaac died 3 days later, taking with him the last direct connection to James's sacrifice, but he had given Eliza something invaluable, the complete truth about her brother's heroism and the full understanding of what her freedom had cost. Eliza returned to Baltimore with a renewed sense of purpose. She began writing down the complete story of James's sacrifice, creating a detailed account that would preserve his memory for future generations. The story became part of the curriculum at the James Thompson Institute for Freedom, ensuring that students would understand the price that had been paid for their education and opportunities. "Freedom is not free," Eliza would tell her students, holding up the letter that James had written on the night before he stole the money that would save her life. "It is purchased with sacrifice, sustained by courage, and shared through love. My brother understood that he paid the ultimate price so that I could live free, and I have spent my life trying to make his sacrifice meaningful for as many people as possible." James never lived to see Eliza free, but his 950 bought over 250 escapes, built a school for thousands, and started a legacy of bravery that still lives on. This is what real love does when the world says, impossible. Smash like, if this story hit you hard. Comment, would you give everything for family? Subscribe and hit the bell. Next Tuesday, meet the teen girl who dressed as a man to free 70 slaves.